Hey Luke, what was your favourite thing about The Amazing Spider-Man 2?
There's so many things to choose from, Michael, but if I had to pick one, just one, I'd say Jamie Foxx as whatever the fucking thing he was, like the Freeze character. Yeah, he was so memorable, as you can tell.
Yes, as a Dr. Manhattan ripoff from Watchmen.
Yes.
Well, you'll be pleased to know that Spider-Man Far From Home sequel is going to be bringing back Jamie Foxx as Electro somehow. This is according to slashfilm.com.
Wow. Thank you to the good people at slashfilm.com for bringing us this news, because that is fantastic. That has absolutely made my day. And
I mean, sure, yeah, J.J. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson. Sure, that's one thing.
It's all right.
But Jamie Foxx is Electro, and that was perfect.
That's it, Electro. Why did I think he was a Freeze thing? Oh my god.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you were thinking about... I guess it's because you've got a thing about black guys playing superheroes who have a blue motif, so you were thinking about Frozone from The Incredibles?
I don't think that was it. I genuinely thought I could picture him as blue, so I thought he must have been frozen. But yeah, obviously he's...
Or maybe it's because you were talking about your favourite film. Just before we started the podcast, you were talking about your favourite film of all time, Cool Runnings.
Yes, that'd be
so, you know, it all came together to... I mean, it couldn't just be that The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was a terrible film filled with unremarkable characters who everyone hates.
Yeah, it's definitely not that. Oh, thank God. Welcome back, Jamie Foxx.
Thank God he's coming back for Spider-Man 3. I was going to try and do a spooky voice, like, hello, but I can't do it. Like, anyway. Hello and welcome to Select and Reflect, the movie review podcast where we look at films that have come out in the near and distant past. We give them a couple of watches and evaluate them beyond first impressions. I'm your host, Michael, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, Luke. And this week we are beginning the most wonderful time of the year, Spooktober, which we of course celebrate every October in the run-up to Halloween. And as always, we look at horror films, and recently, I mean, since last year, we had a theme. So last year, of course, the theme was zombies, and this year, the theme is crazed killers. And we're going to start it off by looking at a classic crazed killer film, Psycho. So Luke, why don't you tell us a thing or two about Psycho?
Yes, indeed, Michael. It is Spooktober, the most wonderful time of the year, like you said, and we are doing one of the most famous horror films ever, Psycho. Since it is its 60-year anniversary, Psycho was released in 1960 and is an American psychological horror thriller film produced and directed by Alfred Hitchcock. The screenplay was written by Joseph Stefano and was based on the 1959 novel of the same name by Robert Bloch. The film stars Anthony Perkins, Janet Leigh, Vera Miles, John Gavin, and Martin Balsam. It was released on September the 8th, 1960 in the United States. So yeah, we're just over 60 years since that was indeed released. And Michael, can you tell me what the budget was for Psycho?
Probably not, because it was a film released ages ago, and I literally have no idea how that would all work out. So I guess I'll go for 1.5 million.
Well. This just might be your worst guess of all time. The box office is 50 million.
Wait, aren't we doing the budget?
Fuck.
What are you?
Oh my god. Fuck.
What are you doing, Luke?
Oh no.
Oh wow, so that's quite funny. I mean, I guess the good news is, I assume that my guess wasn't actually as bad then.
Yeah.
I guess the budget wasn't 50 million.
Yeah, sorry. It's the box office was 50 million and the budget was $806,000. So
okay, so that was reasonably okay.
Yeah.
And I guess, if I was going to guess to be fair, I probably would have guessed the box office wrong, but now I'm going to guess that it was probably about 50 million.
Yeah. You know what? You're right on that. Congratulations.
Nailed it.
Absolutely nailed
that's
it.
Great.
Yeah, no, I was just surprised at it being that high. So I was looking at the Wikipedia page as well for maybe, it got re-released at a certain time, but I can't find anything on that. So maybe it got 50 million right off the bat. But yeah, a budget of 806,000, box office of 50 million. What a sensational return that was. And Michael, here's the big question though. Did you like Psycho?
Yes. Yeah, I did. I thought it was a nice little film. A real classic. What about you?
Yeah, I think the term classic is obviously correct. It has to be. And I can see why people like it a lot. And although it's perhaps not as good as it once it came out, I think that's kind of inevitable.
Yeah. There is an element of datedness.
Yes, but it's still good. You can appreciate it for what it is. And obviously, you mentioned the word classic, and this movie is one of the preeminent horror films. It was nominated for 4 Academy Awards, including Best Supporting Actress for Lee and Best Director for Hitchcock. It's considered one of Hitchcock's best films and praised as a major work of cinematic art by international film critics and scholars due to its slick direction, atmosphere, effective camera work, and memorable score and iconic performances. Often ranked among the greatest films of all time, it set a new level of acceptability for violence, deviant behaviour, and sexuality in American films, and is widely considered to be the earliest example of the slasher film genre, which of course is what we will be doing this month in Spooktober. And after Hitchcock's death in 1980, Universal Pictures began producing follow-ups, which is great. After he dies, great, we can make some sequels now. A sequel, there was 3 sequels, a remake and a made-for-television spin-off, and a prequel television series set in the 2010s. And in 1992, the Library of Congress deemed the film culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant and selected it for preservation in the National Film Registry. All very interesting there. This movie, of course, is one of the most famous. So, Michael, having said all that, how many nitpicks do you have?
I've just got the one.
Just got the one. Well, I've got 2, so you go first.
Okay, and it's a pretty mild one, but obviously Norman Bates is very concerned when he's disposing of this car, which of course has the dead body in it, that it will not sink down. And I'm thinking he should have at least opened the windows of the car. Like, that's basic physics. And I realize obviously he's supposed to be crazy, a bit, let's say, emotionally undeveloped. So maybe he just doesn't realize how buoyancy works. But, I was just staring at it thinking, man, if you would have just wound down those windows, that car would be sinking right in there. So there we go. That's my very great nitpick.
Dispose a body, I know who I'm going to. I can tell you that for free.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I've got business cards for it.
Okay. My first nitpick, Michael, the boyfriend, Sam, is not nearly as concerned as he should be about the disappearance of Marion, or that she's stolen $40,000, but particularly the disappearance. Like, he's talking to this private investigator.
Well, women.
Yeah, and he's just like, well, somebody tell me what's going on here. And then he gets told, and then he doesn't react, like, crazily at all. This is a girl that he wants to marry, and he's just like, oh, well, I guess this has happened now. Well, isn't that weird? I would be. I would think he'd be a lot more concerned than he is. Anyway, we'll move on to my other nitpick, which is not on the film, Michael. It's not on the film. It's actually on life itself, because you said at the start of this, and I also agree, that Spooktober is the most wonderful time of the year, and I agree with that. It is probably my favourite time of the whole year. We're doing these horror films in the lead up to Halloween. I really do like Halloween. Then after that, it's Christmas. And at this time of the year, you also have sport stuff which is going on, which, I do like. The football season is back into full swing, and so is the NFL. And of course, that's true. Those 2 things are going on to an extent, but it's just not the same with coronavirus. Like, there's going to be Halloween's #cancelled this year, Michael. They're properly cancelled, I mean,
yeah, it really is. Like, there's no trick-or-treating at all.
Yeah, and you just can't get into the Halloween spirit. And it'll be the same for Christmas as well. So, yeah, it's just not the same, Michael. And, I mean, we're talking, we're talking about spooky movies, but what's going on in the real world? That's what's spooky, isn't it?
It's enough to make you want to go out there and kill some people.
Absolutely.
Just to show them. That'll teach them all.
Yeah.
That'll get them.
Yeah, but I'm going to look forward to seeing an article. It's like, who needs scary movies? We can just live our real life in 2020 or something like that. And no, but that's the thing. It's just like, it should be a time of year which you can really, enjoy, like, and, watch these movies where people die and be like, yeah, isn't that great? But this year it just doesn't hit the same, which is quite unfortunate, wouldn't you say?
No, yeah, definitely, I agree. I mean, I would say so. Christmas, I think, is slightly more invulnerable to the blight of COVID-19, because obviously Christmas is a bit more about staying inside, but Halloween is definitely much more of the time when you want to go out and about and make sacrifices in your local forest or whatever. So yeah, and I'm also a big fan of Halloween, and I do also enjoy Spooktober. I think it's nice to have a whole month of just one genre. But I mean, I guess to be fair, at least we can always watch these films. I mean, sure, we could go to our local independent theatre where they were showing Psycho. This week, we couldn't do that, and that's unfortunate because we all love going to our independent theatre where we're always showing retro movies. But you know what, Luke? We were able to sit down and watch it in the comfort of our own homes, and that's important because there are many people out there who don't have homes. So there we go.
Yeah, you're right. So okay, I should just show up then and not complain. That's the best thing for it. So anyway, we're going to get into a lot of stuff with Psycho, but firstly we need to mention the plot. So in Psycho, the movie centres on the encounter between a female embezzler on the run, Marion Crane, who is played by Lee, and Norman Bates, who is played by Perkins, the shy proprietor of a secluded old motel and its aftermath. So there we have it. It's in black and white as well, Psycho, on quite a low budget. And let's get into the plot straight away then. So there's this woman, she is called Marion, steals a load of cash, 40,000, so she can marry this guy. I assume it's to pay off his debts.
I was assuming that too.
And drives away to California to meet him, and on the way, of course, stops off at this motel. What is the difference, by the way, between a motel and a hotel, Michael?
I've been thinking about it a lot too. I feel like a motel is slightly more reminiscent of an apartment block. And I don't know exactly why, but I feel like a lot of the time when you see people in motels, it's kind of like the entrance to the rooms are always on the outside, whereas I feel like in hotels, the entrance to the rooms are along a corridor.
Yes.
Which might sound weird, but it's kind of a consistent theme I've noticed. Staying in a motel, it's always like there's a little walkway on the outside and you can go into the houses that way. In a hotel, it's always a guy walking into along a corridor in order to get into his room. So, I mean, that's a weird thing to have a whole different name over, but there it is. I mean, it'll be interesting to look into the etymology, but unfortunately, Luke, it's not an etymology podcast.
That is very unfortunate. Yeah, that's a good point.
Despite my protestations.
So, in Memento, remember his place where he stayed, would that be a motel, right? It would be.
Yeah, that was a motel
and
as well.
And in No Country for Old Men, it's the same thing.
That was a hotel. No, yeah, in No Country for... Well, actually, okay, so there's two things, and there's two different scenes in No Country for Old Men. The scene where all the Mexicans get shot was in a motel. The scene where he's stood in his room and they kind of have the shootout with... he gets shot in the arm, I think, and then they get shot around the car. That was in a hotel, so... It's crazy, isn't it? I mean, that's one of the reasons why that film is so great, because it had equal representation for hotels and motels.
Indeed. So...
let's talk about this plot, Luke.
So, okay. It takes about 30 minutes... actually to get going. We spend a lot of time with Marion, and then she gets killed 15 minutes later, which is a real shock, isn't it, when you see it for the first time? Because you think you're going to stay with this character quite a while, and then halfway through the movie she's dead.
No, yeah, I mean, it's a real twist, I think, because for one thing, the money is, I would say, surprisingly irrelevant to the plot in a weird way, where it's kind of like, one, the fact she steals the money is very... It's not like she has a plan or anything. She just does it on a whim, which kind of feels strange to me. Like, you kind of feel like it would almost make more sense if it's like she's got a plan, and the plan is to jump out and walk out on her job and take all this money with it. She's got a real... Like they say, okay, how usually when people talk about embezzling, it's usually something which is very sneaky that involves like all these plans. Like, oh yeah, this person was embezzling loads of money, and yeah, it usually implies like loads of fancy stuff going on there. There's an accountant who's being paid off, and there's all these different things going on. It's usually done by someone high up in the company. In this case, it's just like her boss is like, hey, here's £40,000. You promise you're going to put it in the bank? And she's like, yeah, but she's got her fingers crossed behind her back. That's the extent of the embezzling. Very, very lame embezzling, I have to say. I like my embezzling a bit more sophisticated.
Yeah, I mean, what can you do? She's one of them broads, Michael. She's one of them women who just probably can't plan anything. She acts on emotion, so that's why she did it. No other explanation, right? Is that what you're saying?
No, yeah, basically. I mean, let me tell you about... I mean, since this is kind of a film noir film, we're allowed to be misogynistic. So let me tell you about these gals with their with their talking. I don't know. Anyway, the important thing is that then obviously she steals this money, and then the money is like kind of... It's interesting to me, and I will say this isn't really an insult because it's obviously intentional, and it is quite an interesting thing. For example, she goes to a lot of effort to hide this money. Obviously... she gets into the hotel, she's kind of working out where to put it. She puts it in her a newspaper and things like that. And then the fact the money is there is irrelevant to the antagonist's goals. The antagonist just like has no interest in this money. It's not like he's like, oh, I'm going to steal the money. So it's a very funny thing to me that would be the case. And yeah, I do think it's kind of it does give the film a bit more of a sense of realism in a sort of like he's just out to kill some random person, you know, he just wants to kill women because he's a weirdo, and it just so happens that this other woman's got a whole thing going on as well. And I think to me that kind of it feels a lot more like two real characters intersecting rather than a plot. And I know obviously you might say, well, plot being crafted is good a lot of the time, but in this case I thought with horror films, realism tends to be the way to go, and I do feel like there's something more realistic about the fact that the money is, like I say, surprisingly irrelevant to the actual playing out of the plot.
Mm-hmm. So she obviously gets killed in the shower scene, which we will talk about later on. And initially, you may think, well, it's the guy's mother who killed her, especially as he reacts so horrifyingly to the body when he walks in her room. And then we have I like this. We have about a good 8 minutes of him cleaning up.
Oh yeah.
And I was thinking it really didn't need to be that long. Like, he was just padding runtime there. You could just cut that by like half. That'd be better. There was a point where I was like, I mean, you're not going to show this, are you? Just him, like, cleaning up. It's not that exciting, to be honest. We get it. He's cleaning up the murder scene. But anyway, so then there's that. And obviously you suspect it's the mother. And then you have a kind of second half of the movie. That's the first half. It lasts about 50 minutes. Then the next half is also about 50 minutes. Although each half is about 55 minutes, actually. You know what? I come to that number because that would make it about 1 hour 50,
and that's
which
about,
is almost the length of the movie.
It's an hour and 48, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
I tell you what, I will say this, it always throws me off with these old films, how the credits are at the beginning, because you go through the credits at the beginning, and then it's just like so strange, because always in my head, you know, I do keep an eye on how much time there is left in the film a lot of the time, and I'm always like, you know, you got to subtract, usually 5 minutes for credits, 10 minutes if it's a big blockbuster, and I'm like, so then it's very strange how a lot of the time the films will literally wrap up with 1 minute left on the clock, and then you're just like, whoa. So yeah, that's strange, but there you go.
Yeah, so we're about halfway through the movie, and then it switches lanes, and we're now following this investigator who's trying to discover what happened to Marion. And then he's snooping around, comes to this motel, recognizes that Marion was here, and he walks into the house that is behind the motel that Norman and his mother supposedly live in, and then he gets killed.
Yeah.
And once more, you suspect it's the mother.
Yeah.
But then we have a twist, another twist, a proper twist this time. Norman Bates. Well, actually, the first one is a proper twist because, I have seen this shower scene before, so I knew it was going to happen. But apparently, at the time, people did not expect Marion to die because the actress was very famous. They didn't expect her to die like halfway through the movie, especially since also she was the supposed protagonist. So it's quite weird that she would die at that point. So anyway, it is revealed that by the sheriff that Norman Bates had a mother who died 10 years ago. She's no longer alive. Although I don't know why the sheriff couldn't have just said that in the first place. Like, the guy said it a couple of times, and then he comes in the conversation when they're 5 minutes in and says, no, she died 10 years ago. Instead of, just saying it outright. But anyway, the two then go and investigate the house. And it turns out that the killer was Norman Bates all along. And his mother was just dressed up as a skeleton. And Bates had been dressing up as his mother to kill his victims because he had a split psychological disorder or something. Well, I guess it's schizophrenia, isn't it? That's what you call it, right?
Yeah, schizophrenia.
Extreme schizophrenia.
And I guess also psychosis, because psychosis is when you imagine weird things. So that's probably a part of it too.
Yeah. So what do you think of that twist, Michael? Do you think it was a good twist?
Well, you know what, actually, okay, so I think in a way it was probably one of the more disappointing parts of the film. I will say this, and we'll kind of get into this with the scariness, but the scene of obviously her discovering the mummified corpse of the mum is the mummified corpse of the mummy, literally, was good, well done. But I do think it's weird because it's kind of a strange twist because it's like this guy, Norman Bates, who's a weirdo, who feels like he's already insane in every single scene you speak to him in, who already feels like the exact kind of person who would be a massive incel murderer, is in fact the murderer. And I thought it was it technically is a twist because it's like, oh, you think, but it's kind of weird because it's like you think that he's just a weirdo freak who is complicit in his mum's murders, but actually it turns out that he's a weirdo freak who is doing the murders and his mum's dead. And it's not a massive twist, really, because it's kind of like, okay, he's already, and I was thinking about it. It's funny that they remade this film fantastically, and then they've gone back to it. I genuinely would be interested to see the Bates Motel, which is the more modern reimagining than the Vince Vaughn classic. But I see a lot of room for improvement in terms of how Norman Bates is characterized, because it just feels very strange to me that he's very obviously shown to be, like, for no time during this whole film, and I did know the twist about his mum being dead, but at no point was I thinking, oh, he seems like a good guy who's just, innocent or whatever else. He always seemed like a weirdo, evil person. And I was thinking about, for example, the scene where, obviously, his mum, in quotes, commits the murder, and then she comes into the house and they have this weird, off-screen conversation, and then he runs down immediately. And I was thinking, I think it would be just slightly better if you had the scene of the mum, again in quotes, committing the murder, and then later on, Norman Bates comes in, discovers it, and is horrified. And this is the first time he sees it. And then he immediately goes to call the police. And then he sees, like, a grey hair or something like that. And he picks it up. Of course, that wouldn't really work in black and white. But, maybe his mum's got some kind of distinct thing. Maybe we see his mum's got a little handkerchief. I don't know. Anyway, he sees something that would indicate it's his mum, again, in quotes. And then he looks at it and he's like, oh, and he's, like, scared. And then he puts the phone down. And then he realizes he's got to try and protect his mum. And you'd see all of that. And to me, that would do a much better job at selling the idea that Norman Bates is a good guy who's just acting to protect his mum, who he's very, protective of, and that actually, and it would make you believe that they are two different people much more than what happens in the actual film, which is, literally an off-screen conversation where it kind of sounds like two people talking, and then he immediately runs down, and he doesn't seem particularly shocked, and then he just kind of, and also the fact he just cleans, like you mentioned, how long and excessive the cleaning up scene is, and how, like, he's just cleaning up for ages, and in a way, I feel like that's kind of, it makes it feel like when he's waiting for that thing to fall down, he doesn't seem like somebody who's horrified by what has just happened and what he's doing. Like, and I think that's kind of the issue. Apart from some very modest overacting, there's no real point where you feel like Norman Bates is disgusted by this murder that his, again, mum in quotes has done. So really, I just don't think the twist was sold very well at all. I hate to dunk on the final twist, but I just don't think it was that compelling.
Once again, I mean, I knew he was, again, this is hard because for your osmosis, you know that he's the killer because I've seen the final shot of him smile before I watched the movie for the first time. So I knew he was the guy who was going to kill the girl. So I find it hard. I guess I wish I could watch it for the first time and not know that to think, think it was believable. But you're right, he is weird. But I guess you could just put it down to the fact that he was in a weird relationship with his mother who was controlling of him. And that's what made him like that. And he covered up the murder because he knew it was his mother. So perhaps he'd done it before. That's all I could think of.
Exactly. It's just, I think it's very strange because I do think the logical thing to have done would be to have Norman Bates be the most sympathetic character you could possibly make him, and really try and sell it on like Norman Bates is a good guy. He's just trying to protect his mum, and his mum's the problem, and blah 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 blah. Like really selling on the idea, trying to make you believe that Norman Bates is a victim. And yeah, like you say, it is a case of obviously we never can experience the twist exactly as it is. But I do think it is the case a lot of the time a good twist can at least be reasonably powerful. And I think we've spoken about this before with some other twist films. A lot of the time a good twist can be reasonably powerful even when you know it's coming, because the way it's set up is interesting enough. You're like, oh yeah, and you can kind of allow yourself to be willfully misled by the stuff in the film that's setting up the twist. And in this case, I don't think there's anything really there that can allow you to be willfully misled. I mean, apart from, again, you can go like, oh, he seemed kind of upset when he saw that murdered woman's body, so he's probably a good guy. And I mean, sure, you could be like, yeah, I believe that. But to me personally, I was just like, I need a bit more from you, Hitchcock, you amateur.
Yeah, well, to be honest, Michael, I am surprised that you don't like the twist, since it was a man dressed as a woman killing people. And that's your bag right there, isn't it?
Oh yeah. I never actually. I mean, I guess actually, yeah, that is the thing. Obviously, it's been in the news recently, has it? The old men killing people. Yes. I never really thought about that. Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the thing. I mean, obviously, in this case, it's the old Well, I don't believe that Norman Bates identified as Norma Bates. You don't meet anyone called Norma nowadays, do you? But yeah, I mean,
No, it's gone out of fashion, that name.
yeah, it is. I
And
mean,
and so is Norman as well.
that's the thing
He's
we should
called
mention, unironically though. It is, I guess, a trope. The idea of and I think there's a logic to it. The idea of men dressing up as women who, because I guess it's kind of to do with the fact that like a lot of men who kill people, and I guess a lot of women who kill people, it's usually attached to some kind of weird sex thing. And then on top of that, you've got a weird sex thing. Well, then there's also weird attitudes about gender. So I can kind of, and especially, he's a mama's boy. So I guess basically, this is certainly a context where that trope makes sense. And I mean, people say it's a trope. I don't know how many other films it's in, but this is obviously one of the most classic horror films. So I guess it did kind of imprint that idea in the zeitgeist.
Yes, absolutely.
I will say this, when the detective dies, that was a moment where the first time I watched this film, I remember thinking, is this just going to be people showing up to this house, not having any idea what's going on, and then just being killed off? And I was like, when that happened, I was like, man, this is, like, I was kind of thinking, this is literally what the rest of the film's going to be like. The detective goes off, and then he gets killed, and then, the fiancé is like, well, I'm going to go there now, and then he goes there, and then he gets killed. And thankfully, it was not like that. Thankfully, towards the end...
Eventually, everyone in America died just going to this hotel.
That's what those magic being. Just like, just a massive line of people just like, hey, let's go. Anyway.
Also, actually, I need to point out the psychologist scene at the end. I think it was, interesting. His reasoning made sense, but it was a bit of an exposition dump, if you will.
I can see that. Yeah.
He just dumps it all out.
Oh, speaking of dumps, Norman Bates is a bit self-indulgent with his monologues, isn't he?
Indeed.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, the psychologist.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So the psychoanalytical part of this movie.
Good segue.
Yes, we talked about it a bit before, but there is definite Freudian elements with Bates and his mother, and obviously that is something that is very, I guess, common in psychology. But it's not just about that. I watched this good YouTube video. It was called "The Uncanniness of Psycho," and it's got like more views than this video will ever have. So
they must be right.
Yes, but the thing is, the point was made in the video, and it's a good point, that the uncanniness of this movie, that is the key. Something that is usually normal but feels uneasy is a very scary thing. Something that is disconcerting, but it shouldn't feel like that, but it is, and it's for the psychological reason that it's like the self, but it's the other instead. Your brain,
the uncanny valley.
Yeah, your brain wants to believe or wants to see this as normal, but it's not. And I guess it's just naturally scarier or creepier than something that is outright weird. That's the, I guess that's why it's naturally scary. The YouTube video I watched goes into some talk about the Mobius strip. Have you heard of that concept?
I felt like I recognise it, but just explain it to me. What is it?
So, it's a concept where, of course, you can find this in Wikipedia, where the world is kind of, the world has two sides to it, and eventually, if you go, there's an opposite to the world. Like if you go down one end, then you'll eventually end up on the other side, basically. And again, the videos or Wikipedia articles can explain it better. But essentially, Norman Bates in this movie is the world that Marion wants, but it's flipped upside down. She wants, at the beginning of the movie, you have the scene where she's with Sam, her lover, and, she's talking to Sam about she doesn't want these, like, trysts in random motels. She wants to have dinner with a picture of her mother, and then, her sister with her as well. She wants a very formal kind of she wants a normal life, and then she goes to this motel where she has his mother in his background. In this massive house. Obviously, she's not actually there, and basically the video explains it quite well. But yeah, it's basically like the world that she wants to go into, and it's flipped upside down, and basically exposing the idealized 1950s/1960s view of the world and how it can be quite scary, quite weird as well. And that is something that, of course, Hitchcock is very keen to do. So yeah, that's a part of the psychoanalytical theme, I guess, of everything.
No, yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, basically that. Obviously, I mean, I guess I don't know how entirely convinced I am by that, because it does feel a bit like is that really quite as there as it's implying? Because I mean, ultimately, I don't think that I would say the desire, because really when you look at what her desire is to not any longer have to deal with hooking up with this guy who she's obviously in love with in a sleazy way, that she wants to have a more real committed connection with this person. And I feel that's quite a normal thing for somebody to want to have. So I wouldn't necessarily say, like, I think even today, I mean, if you watch any your common soap opera where people are constantly having affairs, a very common thing people say is like, oh, when are you going to leave your wife so we can, and obviously in this case not leaving his wife, but it's a similar thing. When are you going to leave your wife so we can finally actually be together? And a lot of the time the husband actually doesn't want to leave his wife. Look out for that, girlfriend. But basically, I wouldn't necessarily say it's entirely a critique of the culture at the time. I think if you were going to look for that, it would probably be more like the way that... I mean, you could do this. I don't know if I would say this. This even seems a bit bold to me. But I think you can make an argument the fact that she engages in quite a bold, independent move of stealing a man's money in order to go bail another man out of his debts, and is then killed by a man, could talk about how male violence is used to keep women subjugated under patriarchy, because the moment a woman chooses to be independent.
Well, of course you'd say that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's probably about how men dressed as women are ruining feminism. Am I right, ladies? No, yeah. I mean, but genuinely, I would say that idea of like that. I'd probably say that's more true, because obviously, I mean, I think it works. She is a woman who steals money from a man. She's going to go pay off another man's debt. She's clearly doing a lot of things which a woman wouldn't typically do in a patriarchal society, and then the consequence of that seemingly is that she gets killed by a man, suggesting that men, are very, very reluctant to acquiesce the power that this system of privilege affords them. Am I right?
Yeah. I mean, look, that's your area.
No, yeah, I guess.
I mean, I don't know if Hitchcock was that woke, to be honest. Like, I doubt. I mean, you can make that interpretation, sure, but I don't think that's what Hitchcock...
No, yeah. Although, to be fair, I also don't think Hitchcock was going for... So the thing that you were kind of talking about, or the thing that this person were talking about, was the idea that, like, she... In some way, Norman Bates is a critique of the idealized view a woman would have of society in the 1960s, 1950s America. That's a correct restatement of the position, right?
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, so I think that would also be kind of woke, though, too. So, it's kind of, it's woke all the way down, Luke, and that's the issue. I mean, that's the thing, like, I'm going to be honest here. I don't think... Like, I'll be truthish. I think that it's legitimate for people to come up with interpretations of this thing, and I think people should do that a lot of the time with horror films, because I think a lot of the time horror films, the classic argument people like to say is that the real terrible thing is, or the real fear is the fear of our society. Although I will say contextually, it should be borne in mind that Alfred Hitchcock mostly just made, like, dramatic thrillers. Like, pretty much every film that he ever did was a dramatic thriller. Like, he did, like, Rear Window, North by Northwest. These are all like thriller films, Vertigo, and therefore I would imagine that he's kind of the sort of person who he just wanted to make an exciting thriller. So I don't really think that there's much legitimacy from position. If your argument has to be that Alfred Hitchcock intended it, then I would probably say there's nothing thematic about this film. But I do think you could make an argument of, well, it doesn't matter how Alfred Hitchcock intended it, because maybe Alfred Hitchcock, as the person who he was, had some subconscious biases, things like that, and we can interpret the film in those lights. But I certainly don't think that Alfred Hitchcock intended to communicate any real themes, apart from just the standard, Freudian stuff about men and people, well, some blokes being a bit dodgy with their shenanigans. That's barely a theme.
Okay, well, I'll go into Slavoj Zizek, his take on this.
Okay, are you going to do the classic sniffing?
Yeah, you know what, let's go. Should I? Probably not, because it's quite long.
Yeah, okay. If it's long, maybe just do it at the end. Just do one massive sniff at the end to make up for it.
Okay, so Marion's world is the world of contemporary American everyday life, whereas Norman's world, it's the nocturnal reverse. So obviously from day to night, which is what happens in the movie as well. She gets to his motel at night. The relationship between these two worlds is that of the two surfaces of a Mobius strip. If we progress far enough on one surface, all of a sudden we find ourselves on its reverse. So there you go. You go far enough down one path, you get to the other path. So it's that's what I guess we're kind of we're kind of talking about with the world that Norman lives in, the reverse of the world that what's she called?
Marion
lives in.
Yeah.
Yes, and their names are similar, aren't they? They've got similar letters in their word, and so therefore it goes back to the uncanny theme that Norman is the uncanny double of Marion. And that is the theme, I guess. That's this person in this video that I watched, they're trying to make that point, and you were saying, well, maybe Hitchcock just liked thrillers, so Hitchcock wasn't focused on that. But the guy was very into, psychoanalysis. He was very much into, getting into the human mind. So I don't
like
think it's
in
that
Vertigo.
far off. Yeah. So I don't think it's that far off. But anyway, there's another actual point from Slavoj Zizek, which isn't to do with this uncanny theme. In his documentary, The Pervert's Guide to Cinema, Slavoj Zizek remarks that Norman Bates' his mansion has 3 floors, paralleling the 3 levels of the human mind that are postulated by Freudian psychoanalysis. The top floor would be the superego, where Bates' mother lives. The ground floor is then his ego, where he functions as an apparently normal human being, and the basement would be Bates's id. Zizek interprets Bates moving his mother's corpse from the top floor to the basement as a symbol for the deep connection that psychoanalysis posits between superego and id. So, there you go.
Yes.
Even, we're really getting into the weeds here of psychoanalysis.
No, yeah.
And I don't know.
I should have read my introduction to Freud before this. You should have told me, Luke.
Yeah, and I don't know if, again, this is Zizek interpreting this, who the fuck knows? Like, who the fuck knows if Hitchcock would agree to this? Like, but we can say maybe because he was very interested in this stuff. Like, he was. So there is always an argument to be made that, yes, Hitchcock was thinking along these lines. You can't discount it.
No, yeah, I shan't. I shan't, and I won't. Basically, I kind of, I think it is legitimate, and I would also say that, again, even if we don't grant that Hitchcock was directly thinking about this stuff, I think you can allow for the possibility that somebody would have this sort of stuff in the back of their mind. Like, I'm sure that if I made a film, even if I wasn't trying to incorporate any themes, I'm still, you know what they say, like, we live in a society. So I think that even if you try to make a film with no themes at all, the fact that you've lived in a society, the fact that you have certain ideas of society that are going to rub off on you because of that, means you're going to incorporate certain themes. A really good example would be the old Incredibles, with how Brad Bird revealed himself to be a massive conservative neo-Nazi in those films that he made. So, he didn't mean to, but he just proved it. What
did he do again?
No, basically it's to do with the whole idea of, like, it's kind of several things, but basically the idea of, it kind of started the whole, why are we celebrating mediocrity thing? And then it kind of got, so then he made Ratatouille, where the whole point of Ratatouille was, he said, like, the literal message at the end of Ratatouille is, like, not everyone can be a great chef, but a great chef can come from anywhere, basically meaning, in other words, you would infer that, no, some people are literally incapable of achieving great things, but you'll be able to find people who are capable of achieving great things in any place. So you'll be able to find these fantastic Übermenschen anywhere. So don't worry about that. Even Jews. And then obviously you've got the classic, the one that really showed.
Did we say that at the end?
Yeah.
The rat says, even Jews.
Just zooms out. But then, and of course the worst one is in Incredibles 2, where Mr. Incredible complains about the new version of maths that they incorporate in America for learning maths, I believe called Common Core. And he says, maths is maths, thus demonstrating the absolutist mindset of a racist like Brad Bird. So what I'm saying is that people can unconsciously, I don't know, I think, but I do think it's probable that Brad Bird, he's not a massive right-wing person, but I feel like you kind of get a whiff of a sort of chauvinistic liberalism in a lot of Brad Bird's content, and I feel like he probably doesn't mean that, but it's very clear from just a lot of the subtext in his stuff that's what's there. And I feel like it's a similar thing with Alfred Hitchcock or anyone, that no matter who you are, ultimately ideology, to make reference to the old Zizek, permeates everything we do, and it's impossible to produce something that doesn't say something about your view of the world. And therefore, yes, let's assume that Hitchcock did have this stuff in the back of his mind as he was making all of these films. Just this one film.
Okay, well there you go. That's the psychoanalysis thing done, and there's still so much more that we could get into, but we're not. People can read up on that if they want to. So we shall get onto the central question of all horror movies: the scariness. I mean, that has to be it, right? Is this movie scary? I do think the black and white really does help.
Yes.
I think of when she's being confronted by the cops or buying a car, in sunny and bright California. If that was in colour, then it wouldn't seem that. It's weird, but of course it's not in colour.
Yeah, who would be afraid of cops, Luke? Especially when it comes to colour.
Yeah, exactly. That's good. That's very good. And so, of course, now the shower scene. She gets killed, and obviously it's a great scene. It's an iconic scene. But I just think it would have been so much better if the music just started slightly before the door is opened, and it's barely noticeable, and then grows louder as the killer approaches, and then reaches this crescendo as the curtain is pulled back. It really does start too late, I think, and it's obviously a wonderful scene, and you can read all about the shot composition, how hard it was to get it all, and the people who were running the American film industry at the time were all focusing on what can and can't be a movie, is saying, well, you need to take out this shot or this shot because she's naked in it, and all the struggles that Hitchcock had to go through with all of that. But I just think it would have been a lot better if the music starts earlier, and it's something that I can't let go of. So what do you think, Michael?
I've never really thought about it. I think I do kind of agree. It is. I guess it's kind of weird actually. There's not much of a musical cue to accompany the fact that Mrs. Bates is coming into view, and I suppose that is a bit of a thing that is objectionable because obviously it is. I mean, I will say this. So basically, the scene is scary. I remember this wasn't to do with watching Psycho, so maybe this is not a great thing to say, but I remember when I was a kid and we had a shower curtain. Nowadays we don't have a shower curtain, we have a normal, a glass screen door, like a normal family, but we used to have a shower curtain. And I do remember sometimes just when it was, a scary cold morning and everyone else was all the way downstairs and I was up in the top floor of our mansion, and I would be washing my hair and I'd kind of get soap in my eyes and I'd close my eyes, and as my eyes were closed I'd just imagine like a silhouette on the other side of the shower curtain and just think, oh, that's scary. And I think that this film obviously speaks to that, the idea, and I think there's a vulnerability attached to the idea of being like naked, and I think this film plays on that quite well. Like I do think in a weird way. I mean, it's kind of obviously nowadays if you're a normal person you're not scared in the shower, but I think it's still scary enough that basically I think I kind of agree with you that idea of the silhouette appearing is the scariest thing, and
it should be. That should be the start of it.
And obviously that doesn't get a thing. I mean, I think for me personally it wasn't something which outwardly bothered me exactly, but I can see what you're saying. It just
would have been better. That's all.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's not something which I'm not going to cry about it like you do, Luke. But I do think it was. I agree with you.
Yeah, you're right. By the way, the vulnerability of being naked in the shower, the most vulnerable thing you can be. So there's that as well. It's why the killing is so like gruesome, and what makes it so iconic. And yeah, obviously, that's the word I used twice, but I just don't find it that scary. I can appreciate it, but I don't find it that scary. And I guess that's my overall thinking of this movie and its scariness. The second death. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. I was going to say, okay, so we can talk about the second death. So yeah, I have mixed feelings on how scary this film is. So basically, there are a lot of moments in this film which feel kind of goofy. And, for example, I accuse the Norman Bates of being a bit overacted, and I stand by that. I don't find Norman Bates a particularly scary person, because I think if you ever just met this guy in real life, you'd be like, weirdo. But then the goofiest moment in the whole film, I have to think, is the second death. I don't know if you're going to contradict me here. Maybe you're about to say you found the second death uniquely.
I agree.
It's so goofy.
Yeah, the slow motion falling down the stairs. It's just really bad. And I get what Hitchcock was trying to do there. And, it would have been a technical achievement, I guess, at the time to do that. But he failed. I'm sorry. It just looks really bad. And, the way the killer is introduced as well, just coming out of a door at the side, isn't that great as well. He just like opens the door and the killer's there. You know, if he came from behind the guy, then perhaps that would have been better. But yeah, it's just quite a shit death scene, to be honest. So
that stands out as, I think, just, and I guess you'd say the most dated too. It really is just the worst one. But I will say, the one thing I appreciate about this film, so I'm gonna bat a bit in this film's corner in terms of scariness. I think there was something a bit like sickening about this film, and there's the two examples I can think of is one, I do think that dark low thud, like the doo-doo, when you get stabbed, there's something about that like darkness of it, or the deepness of it, that feels a bit more like, I don't know, like gross, because it's kind of, it's not exciting, it's just like doo-doo, doo-doo. It's just like, and the other thing is, I will defend for the briefest moment the overly long scenes of Norman Bates doing things, particularly like the cleaning up scene, because I think it forces you to stay with what's happened for a bit longer. And I do think I do kind of appreciate it, the fact that it sort of does mean that in a lot of other films, particularly more modern films, you would just get the kill and then it would just cut to something else, and you probably wouldn't even see, the rest of it. I think like loads of modern films where that would be the case, the kill happens and then pretty much, nothing else. I mean, maybe the corpse will be discovered at one point for a bit of a jump scare or something, but it is quite uncomfortable to have a scene of a character being murdered and then just have another character come in and just clean up all their, human remains. And then the final example, I think, of the last scene of the car being drenched, I think it does just, I don't know, it's like something about like you hear like the ooziness of the swamp. It's like, I can't do it good, but it's like, it just comes out, and I don't know, it's kind of gross. And like, I use the term sickening. I mean, obviously it didn't make me feel sick, but it's kind of like, it's not scary, but there's a certain discomfort I have with it, of kind of just how much it's weird, because in some areas it's really goofy and overacted, and in other areas, and maybe it's just a case of the contrast that makes it feel more extreme, but in other areas it does feel very real and like grounded to me, which is impressive, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just don't find, like you mentioned the car scene, it's just not scary. The cleaning up scene, I mean, he's just doing that because he has to. Like,
we all hate when our parents make us do chores. Am I right?
I know, right?
Appealing to our 12-year-old audience, I assume we have.
Taking the bins out and then cleaning up your dead body that your parents have killed. Just another thing on the list.
Did you ever hear that story about a kid who killed his parents because they wouldn't let him have a party? He killed them with a hammer and left them in their bedroom, and then he hosted a house party. This is a true story.
What a legend. A real go-getter.
No, and then the funny thing is that, like, someone at the party discovered the dead parents during the party. And you think, like, obviously, why would they have been going into the parents' bedroom during a party? Obviously to bang. So, like, imagine how much that would fucking ruin the whole night. Like, it was probably some nerdy in-betweener style kid who just, was finally about to get laid. And they go in there, and there's dead bodies in the master bedroom. Like, well, shit, that's right. I bet what happened is...
he should have at least locked the door.
That's the crazy thing.
I mean, that's just... He deserves it then. You know what?
I mean, he should have, like, put them in... So, obviously, I mean, at least my bedroom doesn't have a door that locks, but he could have put them in the garage, maybe? Or, like, a shed with, like, a padlock.
Nah, I mean, he probably was going to do it after. He's got a party to plan. Let's focus on that afterwards,
I think I'd like to see, actually, that would be a good horror film. The story about, like, Norman Bates, but it's just, he hosts a party afterwards.
Yeah, okay.
Brilliant.
Anyway, so let's talk about the third time that Bates tries to kill. It's Marion's sister. Again, I think it could have been scary. I think you have a really nice setup with his mother's skeleton being discovered. You wonder what it is, and it's the skeleton. And then,
that's a good scene.
Yeah,
at least in terms of being like scary.
She screams, and I can imagine the woman screaming in that instance, and then he comes through the door, but he comes through at a distance. It's not a close up. And that's a real issue, because it's just not as scary if he's like 10 feet away from the camera. And
I will also say it's kind of he does look a bit silly.
Yeah, in that outfit. Yeah, he has to. I mean, he has to, because he's dressed like a fucking 80-year-old woman. But that's the issue, that he looks silly. But if it was close up, then you're just looking at him from a distance, like his face, and you realise who he is. It would be even scarier. But how it's done, it's just not as scary. And then he's immediately tackled by Sam, He doesn't get close to the sister.
Yeah,
and
you
that
would think
ruins
like
it as well.
Yeah, like the thing that would make it better for me. I mean, I'm not too bothered about, because I will say, I mean, again, maybe it's a bit weird, but I will say the almost silliness of it, in a way, I think does make the film feel a bit more real, because I feel like a lot of the time if there's an actual crazy person, the crazy person probably would be a bit silly and a bit goofy sometimes, and obviously, but I'm not going to defend it too much. However, what I do think is you would logically have a scene where, the woman finds the thing out, and then maybe, she finds the thing out, and then maybe she hears the guy coming, or maybe he can appear right away. But the thing is, basically, there should be a scene where he's chasing her around the house, and like and obviously not in like a Benny Hill style way, but chasing her around the house, and maybe she locks herself in a cupboard or something, and he walks in, and then she, it's really intense. Like, is he going to find her? And then obviously, like, milk it for 5 minutes or so. Of, not literally just that one specific scene, but milk the idea of her being in the house with this murderer, and then have the guy come in and save the day would be much better. Because it kind of, it does literally feel like you have this reveal, you have this scary moment of, oh, it's Norman Bates who's the killer, but then it's immediately neutralized, which just feels a bit weird, frankly.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's a good point as well. I mean, that's what I was thinking with you cut up to his face, and then he's slowly walking over. Like, it's normalized that. Well, it's normalized. You realise he's the killer, and then he's about to kill this woman, and it all happens so quickly and from a distance that it's just not done as well as it could have. So yeah, that's the final scary scene, I guess. So overall, I'll say, yes, it revolutionised the horror genre, and it's the foundation for slasher movies, and it's so important, but it's not scary. It's not, and it doesn't hold up in that regard, in that particular way, which of course is pretty vital to a horror movie. It's fine, because obviously what has happened after this movie was created, and it came out in the 1960s, and it was very hard to do scary stuff that we would consider scary nowadays in the 1960s, which we'll talk about next. But yeah, it's just not scary for me. I'm sorry. What do you think?
No, yeah, I mean, I would say it's not. So I will compare it like with like, and I say like with like, this is actually an even later one to compare it with. We obviously did Night of the Living Dead as one of our first films last time, and I would say Night of the Living Dead felt less scary than this. And I say, see, that's the thing, I guess the thing is they're scary and they're scary, because obviously I think as a fully grown adult, it's quite hard to get fully proper scared of a film. And for example, I mean, I do talk about, I think I say like, usually I get creeped out by something, and the way I define how creeped out I am is when I'm downstairs making my chamomile tea before I go to bed, which I'm a wont to do. When I'm doing that, if I have in the back of my head the thought of like a scary image, that's a good sign I'm creeped out. And obviously in this case, I'm not sat there making my chamomile tea worrying I'm going to turn around to see some hotel owner in a dress. It's not an active fear in my mind. But I do think that there is a certain... I think in the very moment of watching this film, there is a certain discomfort, which is subtle, but it is there. I would hesitate to call that scariness. But I do think, I would probably say this is more like a scary thriller, which is to say, in other words, it's scary for a thriller. It's not scary for a horror film. That would maybe be my more diplomatic way of saying it.
I guess so. Okay, you want to make that point that it's actually a thriller, then okay. Fine.
Yeah, I don't know, yeah. But yeah, definitely it's not. I mean, yes, it's not really too scary, frankly. Which is
yeah,
whatever.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah, I guess it is whatever, because, there's a lot of other elements that people focus on that we have.
And yeah, I mean, like you say, I think scariness is one of the areas where a film feels the most dated. Like, I kind of do wonder, what is the scariest, earliest film? So, like a film which, relative to how early it was released,
probably something
is very scary. Yeah, I do think about that. I mean, the thing is, there's a lot of there are actually some films from like the 60s and I think even late 50s that are very shocking. Like there's a film called, I think it's called something like Blood Feast. I think that's the name of it. I think unsurprisingly it's a European film, but it literally has and it's also about an Egyptian immigrant who murders women, which is great. That's that wasn't considered dodgy back in the day to just make films. It's literally just like, I feel like the entire plot of the film is just immigrants are scary and evil. But there's a scene where
obviously
he rips out a woman's tongue with his bare hands. Which is, I'll let you say it. Anyway, so he rips out a woman's tongue with his bare hands, which is obviously a pretty intense thing to have in a film. And you're like, wow, that was and I think it was literally in the late 50s. I think it was released in 1957, this film, Blood Feast. And it was obviously, really, and again, it was not in America. I think, like I say, in Europe, they're all a bit weird. But But the thing with that is it's not really scary. It's more just like shock value. So yeah, I would probably agree with you. And maybe 70s. I'm sure like 70s was when they kind of worked out how to make films that didn't feel dated. You know,
Yeah.
there were a few films.
Yeah.
They were kind of working it out. You know, Star Wars didn't feel dated.
Okay. Well, we'll get into what we're talking about. I guess the 60s and the 70s. We'll talk about the controversy now, because obviously this
Yes.
it's a very dated movie, as we have talked about. It kind of has to be, but it was limited by what it could do, because in the United States at the time, this kind of movie was, quite revolutionary. It happened after the erosion of the production code, and it was unprecedented in its depiction of sexuality and violence. Right from the opening scene, in which Sam and Marion are shown as lovers sharing the same bed, with Marion in a bra. In the production code standards of the time, unmarried couples shown in the same bed would have been taboo. It's like when I read that the first time you saw like a married couple in their bed was the Flintstones. Whenever the Flintstones came out, like those two characters, that's the first time they're just sitting up in their bed. And that was the first time it happened. Another cause for concern for the censors was that Marion was shown flushing a toilet with its contents torn up notepaper fully visible. No flushing toilets had appeared in a mainstream film and television in the United States at that time, which is just incredible, really. Incredible. I can't believe the censors were concerned about flushing toilets. It's amazing, man. And people who were alive back then are alive in the 1960s, obviously. It's wild how things have changed so much in that time period. So yeah, anything to say on that, the controversy, Michael?
No, yeah, I mean, obviously, it's... I will say this, actually. I think for those people, Night of the Living Dead would have been even more shocking. You know, a little girl hacking her parents to death, and a white woman being in love with a black man. Actually, I don't think they're in love, but, I think that would have been very scary to them.
Well, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the flushing toilet thing is funny. And it is weird because obviously I think there are a lot of films from from the past that are a bit racy. You know, there's actually a Alfred Hitchcock film I watched almost entirely by accident. It was just on television when I was with my grandparents one time, and I'm like, oh, I love this, and it was called The Lady Vanishes. And straight up, okay, so there's a detective and a woman involved. They're on a train, sorry, and they're very flirtatious, but genuinely, at one point, the woman is looking around, and I think you'll like this. The woman's looking around in one of the cabins in the train, because it's a murder mystery, and the detective walks in, and to get her attention, he just straight up spanks her. Like, literally, she's just, like, looking around in some cabin, and he just walks in and just goes... And then she just gets up like, yes. And she doesn't even acknowledge it as like an inappropriate thing. She's just like, yeah. So basically what I'm saying is they clearly had weird attitudes about what was okay in a film back then. Because apparently, just casually spanking a woman who you're vaguely associated with on her butt was considered entirely okay. But not being in the same bed with an unmarried woman. So whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, they were alluding to having the affair. It's pretty dodgy stuff. But yeah, overall, I mean, it's not surprising. But again, like you say, it's definitely come a long way since then.
Yeah, I mean,
in terms of smut,
that was kind of if it's not a sexual thing, I guess, spanking them. It's more like put them in their place, perhaps. That's what I'd assume it would be. That's the logic.
Yeah, show a dame who's boss.
Yeah, even though it might not be that, but that would be the logic of doing that. Anyway. So now, Michael, we have to talk about the legacy of the film. Psycho has become one of the most recognisable films in cinema history. As we have mentioned, it's arguably Hitchcock's best-known film. I would say so. You mentioned another one of his. There's The Birds.
Yeah, there's Vertigo is quite famous. North by Northwest. I don't know if you know which one that is. It's the one where
yeah, it's his previous movie.
cornfield, and they're getting shot at by the airplane.
Yes.
But yeah, the Birds is the another big one.
Both movies parodied in The Simpsons, of course.
Oh, and I guess Dial M for Murder. That's another one, which sounds like just a really stupid title in like nowadays. But yeah, he's done obviously he's actually done Rear Window, which is also parodied in The Simpsons. Oh no, that sinister looking kid is coming to kill me.
Yeah, no, they did love that Hitchcock, didn't they?
Yeah, they parodied to be fair, I feel like that's it though. I feel like North by Northwest, The Birds, Dial M for Murder, Rear Window. I mean, this is quite a lot. Psycho, Vertigo, and that's probably all his famous ones.
Yeah.
So
Well,
there we go.
we talk about The
That's it.
Simpsons and
Yeah,
parody.
and I think all of those have actually been parodied in The Simpsons, because of course you get in Marge's Fear of Flying, you get the parody of North by Northwest. Actually, I don't. Oh, I think the one where Principal Skinner, it's like a random episode where they for some reason have a church tower in the Springfield Elementary School. I think that parodies Vertigo, and then obviously, I mean, how do they parody Psycho, Luke? Tell me that.
Hans Moleman in the phone booth.
Oh yeah, you know what? That's genuinely like, it's so stupid. That's genuinely one of my favorite jokes.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I'd like the largest seed bell you have. No, that's too big. Like, it's just so funny. You imagine like what they would have said. Anyway, and also they have a whole Halloween episode. It's a later episode, so it's not very good. But a whole Halloween segment that's parodying Dial M for Murder. So
I see.
I think it's called like I don't know. It's got like a name which is a direct reference to that. I'm going to see if I can find out while you tell me some other great Simpsons parodies.
I was just thinking of what if Family Guy didn't do a parody of Hitchcock, but did like a cutaway joke to Hitchcock. Like, what if Hitchcock was alive today, and the joke would be, this is a great joke. He'd be pitching these movies to movie executives that are like, you know, on the same kind of scary, I guess, boundaries as Psycho.
Yeah.
Or what if this woman, you know, she turns around and it's her dad who's killing her? I don't know, some just like creepy stuff like that. And the joke is that, you know, it's not really that scary. And Hitchcock is he's out of date. And they probably wouldn't do that because, you know, they'd be mocking him after he's done so much. But yeah, it's just I guess it would be just mocking how much things have changed. Yeah.
I found out the name of the parody, by the way.
Yeah.
So there's a non-Treehouse of Horror episode called Dial N for Nerder, which I believe is the episode where Bart and Lisa, it's a season 19 episode where Bart and Lisa accidentally murder Martin, only to find out that they in fact didn't, which, you know, just sounds like such a season 19 plot. But then the Treehouse of Horror episode, which is a very direct parody of Dial M for Nerder, is called Dial D for Diddley.
Okay.
Which is brilliant. Yes. There's also actually, there's a Simpsons parody and a Family Guy parody of the same thing, which is, of course, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, which is, I don't know if you know, but it's the one that goes, he walks in as a silhouette and it's like, do 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 do. Good evening. That's and it's parodied in Family Guy and Simpsons, so it's
that's good to know.
It's a classic.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Like, this is his legacy. He has made so many recognizable.
His legacy is Simpsons and Family Guy parodies.
I mean, that's the thing. The Simpsons is one of the most popular media things of all time. That's the technical term, media thing. And Family Guy is fairly popular as well. And his works are getting parodied in this. And yeah, Hitchcock is his legacy, and it's good because now people recognize. Like, I recognize some stuff from Hitchcock because it's been in The Simpsons. Isn't that good? That's surely good,
yes,
right?
He'll love it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I think it is good.
Yeah, and obviously the shower scene, this is from Wikipedia, has become a pop culture touchstone.
Which is a reference in The Simpsons where Homer hits, Maggie hits Homer in the head with a hammer.
Yes.
And then he,
yes, and it's often regarded as one of the most terrifying scenes ever filmed. Again, I mean...
Okay, yeah. Idiots.
Yeah. Well, let's think. He's pushing the boundaries, isn't he, with that scene? He really is. And he can only do what the era allowed him to do at the end of the day. So you have to put it in context. Its effectiveness is often credited to the use of the startling editing techniques borrowed from the Soviet montage filmmakers. So yes, a lot of cuts and...
Communism, always saving the day.
Yeah, we have to thank the commies for that. Psycho is considered by some to be the first in the slasher film genre, though some critics and film historians point to Michael Powell's Peeping Tom, a lesser-known film with similar themes, whose release happened to precede Psycho's by a few months. However, due to Peeping Tom's critical drubbing at the time and short lifespan at the box office, Psycho was the more widely known and influential film. This is probably, I think, what... I mean, we're talking about the legacy. This is probably what law enforcement thought about, like, this kind of stuff as well. Like, because I've talked about the movie Mindhunter, which just goes to show how little cops knew about these kind of killings that Norman Bates would have taken part in. That's what I think at the end, the psychologist talking to the police officers and telling them what happened. I was like, well, based on what I've seen in Mindhunter, the police officers would just laugh it off and go, what the fuck are you talking about with this gobbledygook? He's a weirdo. he's a kook. He dresses up in women's clothes. And fuck off. I don't know why they're Italian Americans. That's just the.
Well, you know what? Those Italian Americans are always obeying the law.
Yeah, exactly. That's just the voice that pops into my head as someone dismissing this psycho jibber jabber, a cop doing that. But yeah, that's what I think they do, because they'd be like, shut up. He's just a wacko who's fucking murdering people. We don't need to get into this nitty gritty. So yeah, I think that probably law enforcement across America, once they saw this movie, that really informed their views on this kind of thing. So it had a legacy not just in media, but in the real world. I genuinely do think that would be the case. Like any murder that happens that is a bit weird, that's sexual, it would be that people would think at the time, oh, it's like what happened in Psycho. Yeah, so then there's that, and it's an unfounded guess, but I'm sticking with it. What do you think?
No, yeah, I think you're probably right that people, I guess the thing is, this probably is the film that maybe defining people's heads the idea of a serial killer. I mean, the thing is this guy a serial killer? I mean, I guess it's implied
he is,
maybe they kill people. So that serial killers are just crazy and, probably in an uncomplicated fashion. And that's probably the legacy too.
That's what Mindhunter kind of delves into, how serial killers are a lot different to this guy. I mean, it's called Psycho, but he's not actually a psychopath. He's not actually the kind of person that Mindhunter looks at. Because, Mindhunter, they look at people who have killed, who are psychopaths, who are, often very slick. They don't, you talk to them and you wouldn't suspect that they're a serial killer. They talk quite normally. And that's the kind of thing which they delve into. This guy, he's just a fucking weirdo. So yeah, it's not the same thing. But yeah, anyway, that's it really for the talk on Psycho. Obviously, we should shout out the music again, and we haven't really done that. But yeah, the music is great. I just wish they'd used it a bit better. But the music, the violin screeching, is fantastic. One of the best pieces of music you will see in film, which I have to say. So do you want to conclude, Michael? You go first.
So yeah, this is a good film. It is a film where I do think it is dated to an extent. But I also think this film is a film where I don't really have to grade it on a curve, which is how I sometimes do with, for example, Night of the Living Dead, for example, I think was a much more obviously dated film than this. And one of the reasons I gave it kudos was, I guess, for the originality of making a zombie film. And in this case, I think you also have to give the film kudos for the originality. But I also think you have to credit it as a genuinely good film. I think, is this film horrendously scary? No. In my opinion, the film has a slight element of scariness to it. I could see this being I feel like this film's kind of Doctor Who scary, where it's no adult's going to be afraid by it even remotely. But I could see a little kid being
it really is.
Yeah. Thank you. I know. I don't know. That's probably a term I should use more. But overall, I think Alfred Hitchcock, he is a good filmmaker. I think that there is a very strong atmosphere in this film, and I do think you should obviously look at this film beyond just how it is as a horror film, and you can look at it as a thriller. And I think, is it a horror film, is it a thriller? I think it kind of walks that line a bit, as a lot of slasher films do, I think. I think you make an argument, for example, that Scream walks that line between a slasher and a thriller, or a horror film and a thriller, rather. And I think in this case, Alfred Hitchcock made loads of really great thrillers, and I consider every thriller I've seen by Alfred Hitchcock to be a 7 out of 10. In this case, I'm going to put this film as a 7 out of 10. Overall, I think this one's very watchable, and that's something I'm always impressed by with Alfred Hitchcock's films. I guess some people might be of a certain temperament and I say, oh, they're old, they're boring, they're past it. But I think they're all very watchable. I think this film is no exception. I'm actually going to put this film above Men in Black and below The Usual Suspects. That's a number 7. Oh, sorry, a 7 out of 10. So there we go.
Okay, so I'll conclude now then. Look, it's not scary, and it may seem harsh saying that because it's such a classic movie and it did push the boundaries of what is scary at the time, but I can't really praise it in that regard, because it's just not. And some movies age well, some don't, and this is one of those movies which hasn't in that regard. But there is more to it than just, is it scary? The psychoanalysis that Hitchcock delves into, the uncanny themes which are explored as well, and we talked about whether he actually did explore those themes, but we can speculate. And since he was fascinated with that kind of thing, I think we can give the benefit of the doubt to those interpretations of this movie. So that to me is the most interesting part. And of course, we have to look at also just the legacy that this film has left as well, and that props it up a bit. I gave Night of the Living Dead a 7 out of 10, Michael, and I think it is also fair to give this one a 7 out of 10. I probably found, looking back, I didn't find Night of the Living Dead scary, but probably scarier than this, probably because I just think zombies are scarier than slasher movies. Maybe we'll see in the coming weeks whether I still think that. But yeah, overall, for me, a 7 out of 10 for Psycho. It's some people have said it's one of the greatest movies of all time, but we have to judge it by modern standards. We have to, and we can appreciate what it did for the genre, but we can say it sadly has fallen behind. So there you go, 7 out of 10.
Yes, that's fair enough.
And so, what are we going to be doing next week, Michael?
Well, next week we're of course going to be continuing looking at another slasher film. I guess you could argue it's up for debate a bit whether or not it's a slasher film. That's why I did use the term crazed killers to just be a bit more inclusive. But we are looking at The Shining.
Yes, The Shining.
Get hyper.
Indeed. Thank you for listening. We've been selecting and reflecting on Psycho because of its 60-year anniversary, one of the most famous horror movies of all time. Join us next week for another one, which is The Shining, and that will be the 40th anniversary of that movie's release. Who have you been, Michael?
I've been Michael.
I've been Luke. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.
Goodbye.